Yeah, let's do it. Let's break the sky. This is the one. Welcome to Common Censored. I'm Lee Camp, here as always with Eleanor Goldfield.
Hello.
She's the host of the TV show Act Out. I'm the host of the TV show Redacted. Tonight, once a week, we step away from the TVs and we go to the sound booth.
With no pants on.
Of course. Sometimes I don't have them on during Redacted tonight, but this is the show where we talk censored stories and people, sensible solutions, and common ground movements to fight and build.
And sometimes other stuff.
And, let's get into it. Sorry to come to you on a Wednesday or Tuesday night, whatever it is.
It's my fault.
I blame you completely. No, I don't. But it's good. You know, sometimes it's good when we're a day late because...
Keeps you on your toes.
Keeps you on your toes, and a lot of shit goes down on Monday, and we can talk about it.
That's true.
Following day.
But we will get into why it's my fault later when we talk about the forest convergence. But before then...
See, it sucks. Whenever anything's your fault, it's never like you really did a bad thing. It's like, oh, I was at a fucking important protest or get-together. You know.
Yeah, and when you're out
right,
traveling,
you're perfect. Okay, fine.
Your words.
So in the quick news up top, I want to talk about how insane this the day-to-day news of the impeachment inquiry, which, you know, we've been through all of that, so I don't need to rehash it right now. But what's new is that John Bolton, who was, you know, fired a few weeks ago by Donald Trump, because believe it or not, Bolton was trying to create more war, even though Donald Trump's military drops more bombs than ever before. Bolton was trying to create more war. Donald Trump was trying to create peace in some select pockets, such as North Korea, and Bolton was standing in the way of it. So, believe it or not, this guy was let go, and basically Mattis also quit the Trump administration because there was not enough war, enough men on the ground, men and women, enough belligerence going on. And these are the people held up on the lofted into the sky on the shoulders of our mainstream media as somehow morally superior because they stood up to Trump. And so today and some yesterday they were talking about how John Bolton apparently was speaking out when he was in the administration, speaking out internally against what Rudy Giuliani and Mick Mulvaney were involved in. And basically, apparently, if you believe some of this, which I think some of it's probably true, that Giuliani and Trump and Mick Mulvaney, who's now the White House chief of staff, were basically creating a alternative foreign policy, at least in the area of Ukraine and some other places, to try and get this dirt on Biden and out his corruption. And so you have Giuliani and Mick Mulvaney running around trying to create, trying to do something outside of any, of the regular cabinet members and everything. They were working with Donald Trump, so they were working with the president, but still, it's fucking bizarre. And John Bolton said internally that this was wrong and that he was worried about it. And he said to the White House, apparently, like legal counsel, that Giuliani was a hand grenade that was going to go off. And now, here's the funniest thing, which I think, Eleanor, you can appreciate this. Our mainstream media is now celebrating Bolton as a morally superior human being who knew that this was wrong. Now, think about the fact that it's impressive. It's, like I said, heralded if you say it's wrong to do these things out of line, out of the normal line of foreign policy. But if you're pushing to obliterate civilians, bombing on a day-to-day basis, destroying countries, destroying millions of people's lives, that's legitimate. That's fine.
Well, you know, when you were telling me about this story before we started recording, it reminded me. Do you remember last year? If we can blast away the cobwebs. Remember when Attorney General Jeff Sessions was fired? And everybody came, well, not everybody, but like the Move On folks and the fucking hashtag resistance came out.
The Mick resistance.
In support of Jeff Sessions. And I saw, and here in DC, they put up a big sign outside the White House that said protect Mueller, like he needs fucking protection. And Jeff Sessions, like I saw signs that said, I can't believe that I have to march in support of Jeff Sessions. And I was like, fuck, me neither. Why are you?
No, it didn't say have to. I can't believe I'm marching to protect Jeff Sessions. And your response was, me either. What the fuck's your problem?
Right. And it's this sort of, and for
this is by the way, Jeff Sessions, long time, one of the biggest racists in Congress.
Legit
horrible
said
human
that
being.
he liked the KKK until he found out that they smoked weed. Like that's his only problem with the KKK.
That I can kind of respect. That's hilarious. As a comedian, I find that funny.
But this sort of like selective, this selection of what you think about these people and the selection of their history and their present and the ignoration of their awful personalities and their awful perspectives on things. It's typical, right? It's very typical of the powers that be, because ultimately they're all on the same team. So but this sort of like, oh well, we hate Bolton, but now we like Bolton, because ultimately it doesn't fucking matter. Bolton's just like that this month's flavor, just like Sessions was this month's flavor. It doesn't really matter.
Agreed. And then the point I tried to make on Redacted VIP, which will air in a day, is that it's acceptable to kill or murder or maim or do all kinds of, if you were to go down the list of horrible shit, it's fine to do all of it as long as it's done in protection of the empire, by the rules of the empire. The problem was these people were going around the standard rules of the empire, and they were going after some of the other ruling elite, meaning Biden and the Democratic Party and stuff. Whereas if you're talking about killing, murdering, breaking all kinds of laws in other countries, these people apparently hate, drugs, the whole drug war. If you want to sell drugs, you can do it as the CIA. As long as you do it within this certain thing to protect the empire, to service the empire, then it's fine. But if you, and that's what Bolton is, he's done all of that. But if you are going around in a different manner and not doing it in that acceptable way, then you are the worst kind of criminal, which is what Giuliani was doing, which I'm not defending Giuliani's actions. I think Giuliani is a fucking maniac, totally lost his mind, fucking racist piece of shit. Mm-hmm. But I think that's the difference between him and Bolton.
Yeah, and I think that this is just another example, and I stand by my and I'm not saying that we shouldn't cover this. I think that it's important to keep people updated on the absolute horrific shenanigans of our system. But this is why another reason that I feel that the whole impeachment ruse is fucking absurd, because again, Bolton's good, Bolton's bad. Who the fuck cares? Like, Giuliani did this, Giuliani did that. His associates were arrested. It doesn't fucking matter, because that has nothing to do with the price of your health insurance. It has nothing to do with your living wage. It has nothing to do with whether you live in a food desert or not. Like, these issues are the tit for tat sandbox tiffs of the ruling elite and have nothing to do with us, which is of course why corporate media focuses on them, why their overlords want to focus on them. And so ultimately, like, the whole fucking impeachment theater is nothing to do with anybody, and neither party really gives a flying fuck how it turns out, because they know that they're still going to be in power at the end of the day.
Well, the one thing I'll add to that, and I agree with everything you said, is that it's not by accident that they're focused on something that is so meaningless. This is serving to cover up all of those issues you just talked about.
Exactly.
So the Democratic Party does not have to fear,
right.
Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. They'll still fear them, but I'm just saying, remember a month and a half ago, remember what most of the country was talking about? We were talking about healthcare for all. We were talking about all of the issues that are being brought up by Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren on those Democratic debate stages.
Tulsi Gabbard.
And Tulsi Gabbard, on those debate stages. We were talking about those things, and that is not the discussion that the Democrats, most of the Democrats, or the ruling elite Republicans want to have.
Exactly.
And so this impeachment thing has covered it all over. It's all gone. There is no mention of Medicare for all. I mean, there will be in the debate this week, but that's happening as we speak. But the mainstream media is not covering it. And just one other thing I wanted to add to show how right you are is I just read that Moody's it predicts the next president who's going to win the presidency based on economic factors, and it has gotten it right every time for decades, except apparently it thought Hillary Clinton would win by two percentage points or something. But it's basically always gotten it wrong, right? And they are saying that it is just about guaranteed that Donald Trump will win the next election unless the economy tanks.
Yeah, unless the economy tanks.
As long as the economy stays, then he's getting in. And so,
which is
now,
like, just pause for a second and think about how amazing that is. That of all the horrific things that Trump is and that he does, and if folks had the misfortune of hearing any of his speech in Minneapolis, which was basically just a fucking fascist fest, of all of the things that Trump is, the only thing that could take him down is the planned crash of our economy. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Just think about that for a second, and then look at our Democratic Party and be like, wow, you can't even beat that. And that tells you everything that you need to know about the two-party system.
But the point I was going to say that supports what you were saying about how meaningless the impeachment hunt, at least on this topic, is. If they were trying to impeach him right now for all of his rape charges, I'd be like, fucking,
amen.
Yeah, he needs to be prosecuted for it. All right, absolutely. But is that he is that likely to win, meaning we are going to spend our whole year with nothing but this effort towards impeachment, and it's going to fail. It may out a lot of corruption, but it's going to unless Trump agrees to walk out of that door, which he never would, it's going to fail. And he'll win unless the economy collapses. And what will we have done for a year? Will we have spent that year building a better world? Will we have spent that year as activists, as protesters, as people speaking out, talking about important issues, trying to create a better world? Or will we have spent it simply on the back of our heels yelling about Trump?
Well, I'd like to say some of us will not be spending that year bitching about Trump. But yes, the move on folks, the fucking hashtag resistance folks will be spending that year doing essentially fuck all.
See, you're maligning hashtags when you say that. I think it should be Mick resistance, and then we don't have to hurt the hashtag, which I feel like they're friendly.
So the hashtag in general, or just
in general?
Oh no, I'm a hashtag fan.
The hash.
I'm a hashtag fan. It's just the hashtag resistance is usually
no. I get what you're saying. I'm saying that by associating with resistance, it's putting a nice guy with an awful human being, and you're grouping them together. All right, let's get to some more important in certain aspects, in certain respects, topic, which is what's going on in Syria right now, and it's kind of so much to say that it's tough to set up, but I know that most of you listening to this know the bare bones of what has happened. Trump is pulling out by the way, it was only 1,000. The 1,000 troops, U.S. troops that were there, but it was basically the threat of U.S. Harm was there. And so those are being pulled out. The Pentagon and the mainstream media.
Syria.
Oh, sorry, of Syria. Of an area of Syria that's by the Turkish border. The mainstream media, the Pentagon, everybody, John Bolton, New York Times, Washington Post are all hair on fire. Donald Trump is a maniac. How dare he ever pull a troop out of anywhere? So that is what's going on. Now Turkey has done some bombing of and I believe also invasion of certain areas of Syria. However, that only lasted for a few days, although I'm sure some fighting will still continue. But before the Kurds in that area along the border have now basically signed a deal with the Syrian forces, which our mainstream media likes to call, the Assad forces or whatever, but we don't call our military the Trump forces. So really,
Yeah, the Assad loyalists.
right. Well, what's so amazing about the term Assad loyalist is they use it to mean all of the human beings living in Syria who are not actively
Trying to overthrow Assad.
armed struggle behind barricades with guns.
Which would make us Trump loyalists.
Which would make us Trump loyalists. And it would mean anyone who, let's say, is living in Syria who just isn't armed and running around like a rebel, even if they didn't vote for Assad, if there were ever a vote, even if they hate Assad, even if they ran around their local coffee shop talking about how much they despise Assad, they're called Assad loyalists. And so these papers are saying that our sanctions, our economic war on Syria, which, by the way, never mentioned in any of these reports, our economic war, which is killing people in Syria, medications can't get in, food troubles, there's no gasoline in areas, like all of this shit. And there's papers that say, luckily, it's hurting the quote-unquote Assad loyalists. Meaning it's hurting everyone in Syria.
Well, and just to kind of sidestep tangent here.
Well, I just wanted to finish the sentence I was in the middle of.
Yes.
They signed a deal with the Syrian forces, and now it seems that those Syrian forces will protect them from Turkey.
Okay, but so to back up for a minute, some people might be listening to this and being like, I don't know what the fuck the Kurds are. What are we talking about? So the Kurds are... they're basically a cultural and ethnic group that their home includes northern Syria, but it actually is spread across Iraq, Iran, and Turkey as well. And historically, they've lived in these parts of the Middle East for thousands of years. And after World War I and the fall of the Ottoman Empire, the British and French, yay colonialism, promised the Kurds that they could continue to reside in those areas, and they intended to create a country called Kurdistan. And of course, spoiler alert, the French and the British just fucked them over. And so, I mean, there's a lot of history here, obviously, because I'm talking about the fall of the Ottoman Empire. So there's a lot of history between then and now. But the basic gist of what's happening now, or what happened, is that the Kurdish army, the YPG forces, you probably saw some magazine articles and things like that, some stories about the female fighters with the YPG. So these forces have been the most successful at beating back Daesh, or also known as ISIS. They have basically kept the north of Syria in many respects free of these extremist Islamic forces. They are incredibly powerful. They are incredibly autonomous in that sense. And they have been befriended in the past by the U.S. because the U.S. wants to overthrow Assad. So they joined forces with the Kurds in order to battle Daesh and also have a nice little hunkering down point for battling Assad. But the Kurds, throughout this whole thing, they've seen this before. You know, there's a Kurdish saying, our only friend are the mountains. And so they knew that the U.S. was not going to be their friend when it didn't suit our imperialist.
The U.S. had famously told them to rise up against Saddam Hussein and then turn their back when it was no longer useful to the U.S., and Saddam Hussein killed many of them. So they've had this done to them before, where the U.S. is like, yeah, we're your buddies.
Right, and of course, the Kurds are not the only ones, right? If you look at the history of U.S. imperialism, our entire history is dotted with these kind of issues, all the way back from the founding of the country, where we pitted Native American tribes against each other and that sort of thing. So this is a tried and true plan that we've been putting into effect. And so the Kurds knew that the U.S. would, at some point, turn its back on them when it suited our needs. And so there's kind of like a double-edged sword here in terms of, so I agree that pulling out troops from the Middle East in terms of U.S. imperialism is a good thing. However, as of Sunday, which was, what the fuck day was that? That's October 13th. The UN estimated there were some 130,000 refugees in Syria just because of the Turkish forces coming over the border and attacking.
Right, people were fleeing, yeah.
Yeah, and people were murdered and killed, and the Daesh prisoners that the Kurds had under lock and key, many of them escaped, which of course also kind of serves U.S. imperialism, because then we can be like, look, terrorists, we need to bomb more.
Well,
So there is like a double-edged sword here. It's good that we're pulling out troops. Yes, get the fuck out of there. But at the same time, we have allowed Turkish forces to bulldoze through parts of traditional Kurdistan and really, devastate the area.
Well, I don't know if the area is devastated. Maybe certain areas, but it sounds like the majority of the devastation has been stopped by this deal with Assad's forces.
Well, I mean, I guess that's semantics because some of the video and pictures I saw I would qualify them as devastating, but
but here's the thing. But there's so much that your mainstream media won't talk about, and one of those things is none of this would have happened without U.S. invasion.
Right.
This was a U.S. invasion of a sovereign nation.
It
doesn't. Huh?
You're talking about back like 8 years ago when we first started.
We're still we're still invading Syria.
I'm just making sure that people understand.
We have not stopped invading Syria.
I just want to make sure that folks understand who don't know a lot about this. Not like I'm a fucking expert, but that folks understand that we didn't just invade northern Syria.
Right.
The U.S. invasion of Syria happened some like 8-9 years ago ish.
When we first arrived.
Right. So I'm just making sure that we're on the same page. That we, in case anybody has a timeline out.
I would say it is continued U.S. invasion that's gone on for all these years.
Yes.
It is a sovereign country. U.S. forces do not own it. And instead, this is talked about in our mainstream media as if the United States owns this area of Syria like it's ours. And how dare us... how dare Trump give away our land? I mean, the way it's talked about is horrific.
Do you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of that line from Maverick where Mel Gibson, and he's looking around, and there are Native Americans that look like they're about to attack, and he says, I figure it's their fault for being on our land before we got here.
Yep. It's kind of like that.
That is. If you ever wanted like a one-line foreign policy for the United States, that's it.
And I love that you quote Maverick.
It was a great film.
But no, very true. But so in all this, pearl clutching by our mainstream media, which does not care as we kill so many civilians, as we drop a bomb every 12 minutes. They don't care about any of that devastation. Never mentioned, no videos shown, nothing. They don't hardly care. There was about 1 week of coverage of the, Palestinian Great March of Return where they're just being slaughtered. And yet, thousands, over 1,000 people have been killed, I believe, or thousands have been shot. Well over 1,000 have been shot. Maybe it's still in the hundreds have been murdered. And this is unarmed people killed, with a government that we support and arm in Israel, and not talked about hardly on your mainstream media. Like I said, it was 1 week, I think a year ago they covered it. And yet here in this one moment, they say, why? Oh my God, we got to care about these civilians. And so when I see that, I go, well, okay, what's the empire's game here? Mm-hmm. How does this serve them? But I agree also that I don't want to see any Kurds get hurt. I don't want to see anybody dying from bombs. But it's just hilarious how this is discussed in the mainstream media as like it's our land that Trump has just given away. No, we invaded a country. You don't have to like Assad to say we invaded Syria.
Right. Yeah, it's not so black and white, so on and off. But I guess the question is, what do you think will happen now that the Kurds have signed an agreement with the Syrian army? And I mean, I don't see this working out for the Kurds because the Syrian government is not sympathetic to the Kurdish push for autonomy.
So I've forgotten his name, but I just heard an interview, and he's far more knowledgeable in Syria than I am, and he wrote an article apparently back in this past January, saying that it's only a matter of time. It's titled like it's only a matter of time, and basically that we were keeping the troops there for a little while longer, but it was only a matter of time before they left. And so for those people, I feel like that really understand the peoples there and the U.S. and where things stand, and Assad's power structure and all of this stuff. They knew that it was only a matter of time before the U.S. largely pulled out, and at that point, these people were either going to get attacked by Turkey or retaken by Syria. And so if there is a peaceful deal with Syria and Syria doesn't decide to kill a bunch of them to show them a lesson, then maybe this is the best that could have been hoped for.
Yeah, it's I guess the feeling is that it no matter what happens, it will end poorly, which is kind of why you have folks saying, oh, we need to keep our troops in places like Afghanistan and Iraq. Like, we have to stay there forever, right? Because, it would be so devastating if we left. And the truth of the fact of the matter is that, yes, once you completely destabilize a country and once you force it into a death spiral of civil war or, armed conflict, then, yeah, you leaving is only going to bolster that power vacuum. It's not going to do anybody any favors. However, does that mean that you should just fucking colonize that place or let your empire take over that place forever?
Well, and also we're not giving them a happy, healthy life. It's not like everything's going great in Afghanistan, and if we just stay there, everything will keep going great. Instead, it's quite the opposite.
And of course, the one of the cornerstones of this is that we created ISIS or Daesh,
So something I wanted to add
the extremist Islamist forces that the Kurds have been forced into fighting desperately, and many have lost their lives because of it, we fucking created. And Turkey has been supporting them,
funneling them in,
literally smuggling them through the border of Syria, arms and fighters and money to ensure that the Kurds constantly have to fight for their lives.
And you want to get it even more complicated, the U.S. has allied with various, Al-Qaeda fighters and people that ultimately
to fight against Assad.
To fight against Assad, yeah. Basically, it was the more chaos, the better. And so you have ISIS fighters that were trained by the U.S. initially, have weapons from the U.S. They just funneled all this weapons and funding into basically just chaos in Syria. And this gets to the end point, which is the U.S.'s biggest number one goal in Syria was a collapsed state of chaos. Yes, ideally, okay, you get a U.S.-backed president in there who gives away all the oil to the U.S. or whatever. But that's not goal number one. Goal number one is let's just destroy this state so that it's not a threat because it's not powerful. And they've succeeded in a lot of ways. They didn't get Assad out, but they made Syria miserable, and the sanctions continued to destroy people's lives. And if they really wanted to rebuild the people of Syria and help the people of Syria, then you would end those sanctions.
I think isn't this your line from? I think this is your line from an older special, but you say something like "We're losing at a game of solitaire."
So that was back when I was talking about it had come out that the U.S. was funding was paying the Taliban to let our trucks through, because on a lot of these mountain passes there's only one way, and so paying the Taliban to let our trucks through so we could fight the Taliban. And so my line was, no wonder a scrappy group of, guys in flip-flops and torn clothes can compete with the most powerful military in the world. They have us on their side. And that is what we do, because, it's so fucked up. And at one point in Syria, and this was like a Washington Post headline. This was not some, edgy alternative rag. This was Washington Post headline, CIA rebels found to be fighting Pentagon rebels.
Yeah.
So basically the CIA had funded and backed these rebels, and they were fighting the Pentagon funded and backed rebels.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you want a analysis of this that involves all of the tribal names that we don't know and everything else going on, various border towns that I definitely have not studied, check out Aaron Mate and Ben Norton. They did, what's the show called? Pushback? This show is Pushback on YouTube, so you can get it there. It's also on Gray Zone. Okay.
Yes, Pushback.
What's next?
So next, there's some good news, and this is why we're a day late. So listen to the story, and then maybe you won't get mad. So I was this past weekend. I was and Monday. I was in the woods of southern Illinois in the Shawnee Forest as part of the Forest Convergence, which it was explicitly noted that it's not a conference, and I think we talked about this on the show before, and maybe some of you were there because
does that mean no name tags? Because
there were
for real problem with name tags.
There were name tags, although I didn't wear one because I hate name tags. But there were name tags, but they were fucking awesome because they were like a fist that was coming out of the trees, and it looked awesome. So they were the coolest name tags you've ever fucking seen in your life. And it was in this beautiful area of the Shawnee Forest by a beautiful lake. And so the setting was perfect for the discussions, which centered around how do we build power, how do we connect struggles and build solidarity with regards to protecting forests, but also addressing climate chaos and all of the interconnected issues such as Indigenous rights, women's rights, economic collapse and things like that. So it was a brilliant weekend, and I don't know if the organizers are going to listen to this, but if so, kudos to you, because it was a brilliant weekend that brought together folks from all over, not only the United States, but also from Canada and from South America to talk about these grassroots movements to fight and build, and it was absolutely powerful and brilliant, and really focused a lot on those issues that I like to focus on, which is those intersections, right? The intersections between our siloed issues that so often goes undiscussed and unnoticed, which of course is very detrimental to our issues, because if we stay in our silos, then we won't ever get anywhere. We will literally just stay stationary and stagnant in those silos. So in particular, the connection between things like man camps, which is the name given to the temporary camps set up by fossil fuel companies when they're doing projects predominantly in very close to Indigenous reservations and missing and murdered Indigenous women. So these temporary.
I thought they were rounding up men and putting them in concentration camps. Which don't say it. Don't say it.
I'm just going to quote Carlin, or sort of quote Carlin, where he said that what you should do is you should just take these fucking men and you put them on an island with nothing but whiskey and PCP and you watch them kill each other, broadcasting it on live television. And I still think that's a brilliant fucking idea. Anyway.
I feel like nowadays you couldn't say that. You'd get in trouble.
Well, I just did. So, and I stand by it. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and I approve this message. That's my campaign, folks.
That's the new.
That's my issue.
That's on the posters. Round up all the men, put them on an island to kill each other.
You're missing out on the PCP and whiskey. I mean, I feel like that's the best part.
I'm just not sure how many male votes you would get. That's what I wonder about.
That's okay. You got to know your audience. So that's the name that's given to these temporary camps where these workers live and work in order to construct or work on these fossil fuel projects, and they're often very close to Native American reservations, and Indigenous women and girls go missing, are flooded into the sex trafficking rings, are raped and murdered, and the issue is, of course, that because of our fucked up treaties and laws, indigenous what's it called? Gosh, I'm very tired from this convergence, so my brain is not working.
I don't know where we're headed. Right, help out.
They don't have jurisdiction to prosecute non-natives. They being the Native American tribes. So,
but also for a long time they weren't even there wasn't even a registry keeping track of how many had gone missing.
Well, there still isn't. Because there's a big problem because these are considered to be sovereign nations, these Native American reservations. And so there's no the FBI can go on to the property, but they don't have like a local or a state police or anything like that. They have the indigenous, they have the tribal police, and then they have the feds. Right. And there's no connection between like the state and local. So if a guy goes just off the reservation, rapes and murders, let's say a black woman, and then goes on the reservation and rapes and murders an indigenous woman, there's no connection between those crimes. They're not in the same database. They're in
Right.
totally different databases, and there's no connection there, and it's a fucking mess. And of course, this is based on the fact that no one cares in terms of the systemic care. There's no systemic interest in missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. They don't fucking care. So, and this is intricately tied to the fossil fuel and extractive industries. This is a perpetuation of colonialism, of course. I can't remember her name, but she put it really brilliantly once when she said that first they came with smallpox blankets and, bayonets, and now they come with bulldozers and pipelines. And this is just a perpetuation of the same colonialism. It's just using different tactics. And this idea that Indigenous women and girls are absolutely disposable, just like the earth is disposable, just like our resources like clean air and clean water and clean land are disposable. So these are intricately tied together. And of course, this flows into other issues as well. This is intricately tied to what we're things like healthcare, because of course, how could you possibly have an interest in public health if you're poisoning your water supply, if you're poisoning your air, if you're poisoning your land? This ties into food sovereignty and the issue with us absolutely depleting the soils in order to grow these monoculture crops and that absolutely decimate our soil. And of course, the issue of deforestation. So it was a brilliant convergence that not only brought together issues like this, but brought together folks that work on these disparate issues from all over, and of course folks from the front line fights, whether that be pipelines or mega dams or deforestation and logging efforts. So it was a really brilliant convergence in that sense, and there will definitely be echoes and ripples that come from this. And
That's really great. Yeah, I mean, you and I talk about this a lot, that one of the things that's missing perhaps most from our current capitalist culture is more community, getting together, speaking to each other. And then I'd say the next step is, not my slogan, but the thing I warn people of, I try to warn people of, is that absolutism breeds defeatism, in that there's just so many people that it's like you disagree with them on one issue and they're somehow an arch villain of yours, an arch enemy and a traitor to your cause or whatever. But it's like, if they disagree on one issue, they disagree on one issue. I don't expect everybody to agree with every word that comes out of my mouth. I'd say 99%. If you're at 97, you're lagging a bit. You better get on the fucking train. All right, get on the goddamn train, because it's leaving. It's leaving the station, my friend.
And I think a big part of this is also the idea of having those conversations, not even, it might sound cliche, but around a fucking campfire. And I remember I was talking to a guy who came from not too far away, and he had been...
Were there marshmallows?
No.
God damn it.
I know. I was a little disappointed. But the kitchen crew made amazing fucking biscuits. I swear, I've never had biscuits this good. But anyway, if you're having an event like this, look up Tooth and Nail Collective, because they are fucking wizards in the kitchen. But that's a side note. But I was talking to this guy who came from not too far away, and he had worked in the coal industry, and he said, I get the idea here, but I think that you might still need to lean on coal because we don't have a way to transition. And so, yes, like the 18-year-old me.
When he said transition, did he mean in terms of our jobs, or he thinks that we don't have energy that can come
both?
From...
So it's jobs, but it's also the fact that he doesn't think that there's enough renewables right now to make it happen. And here's the thing.
Yeah, right.
18-year-old me wanted to grab him by the fucking lapels and be like, what the fuck is the matter with you? But I was like, but and this is the other thing. It's like being around these folks,
but
and
you
having...
saw that he had an adorable name tag on with a scratch and sniff sticker on it.
But what I did notice is that he was talking to me because he wanted to hear my thoughts on the subject. He wasn't attacking. He was there. I mean, here's this former coal miner that was at this convergence,
that made a choice to be there
because he wanted to learn more. He wanted to hear what folks were doing.
Or he's the worst infiltrator ever. I work in coal. Moles. I train moles.
Moles. Oh my God! Please tell me a mole trainer is a thing you can be. I want to be a mole trainer.
I mean, moles on your feet. I'm a dermatologist.
We have derailed. Okay, easily. It's very easy to derail me right now because I'm so tired, so be careful. But anyway, I could tell that he actually wanted to hear my thoughts. And this is something that we absolutely have to do. And he had talked about how folks on the left and radical environmentalists had demonized him in the past. And it reminded me of something that your dad actually brought up when he was talking about how when
I
folks
don't
came
have a
back,
dad. I landed here in a pod from space. Like
when folks,
Superman.
all right, when folks came back from Vietnam, how they were demonized and how that's the wrong perspective to take because it's not their fault that they were sent to die in Vietnam. It's the fault of the system.
Yeah.
And it's not this guy's fault that he was forced to work in coal if that's the only job that was available to him, just like it's not the fault of poor people who have to shop at Walmart or what have you. So I think that like this sort of these conversations and this sort of outreach to folks that aren't already on your side or whatever the fuck that is, I think that's vital. And it's so important to sit down with folks and have these conversations and say like, look, I get where you're coming from. I get that you had to work in the coal industry. I'm sorry, that really fucking sucks. But here's what we can do. Here are the alternatives. And this is why it's a better idea than leaning on coal at all. And this is why it makes more sense both in terms of climate and economy and your health and your wallet. Like, this is why it is a better choice.
And the biggest thing is that, our government, we live in such a rich country that we have the money to shift from anything to anything if we really want to. We have the money to build up our infrastructure. We have the money to switch from coal to wind if we subsidize it the way we subsidize big oil. So really it just comes down to a choice of society. And unfortunately, big oil, big coal, everything, they have such a amount of money and organization and owning of the criminal justice system and the government that they can say, well, these subsidies are going to keep going to oil and coal. And the truth is, if our society were to decide that we're changing tomorrow, we could change tomorrow.
Right, and I actually used your line. I said that you could give people jobs doing anything. I said you could give people jobs giving other people herpes if you really wanted to. And he laughed heartily. So
there we go.
Thank you for giving me that line.
You're welcome.
So yeah, no, it was a brilliant convergence, and I think a lot of times folks feel disheartened.
Ironically, at those man camps, they kind of do have jobs giving people gonorrhea and chlamydia, because that is one of the side effects of fracking. When fracking comes to a town, literally there's like an explosion of STIs. Is that the new term?
Oh, really?
Yeah, they've changed it, which is good because they're not all diseases.
That's true. But anyway. So it was a brilliant convergence. I know that a lot of times people can go to these and feel disheartened that we just kind of talked about talking about things, but there was actually some movement that was made here, and it's also always, of course, brilliant to see how many folks are invested in the fight and build. And again, this is the real shit as opposed to like the impeachment shit. This is like the real shit where people have actually managed to stop or reroute pipelines, or where people have stopped forests from being cut down. Like, this shit has happened, it does happen, and it will continue to happen, and it will continue to happen on a larger scale if people stop paying fucking attention to the impeachment and actually go protect some fucking trees or some fucking waterways. Then we can actually win.
Damn straight.
Yes. I approve this message as well.
Put that on the fucking poster. Put that on the poster. Well, on that speech, I'll give the good pipeline news before you give the bad pipeline news. Okay. The good pipeline news is the Mountain Valley Pipeline has gotten a stay from the appeals court, and I'm going to talk about that on Redacted Tonight this week.
Yes, although I'm not sure exactly where it stands, because today, the 15th, the Mountain Valley Pipeline agreed to pay $2.15 million in a civil penalty to resolve a lawsuit filed over the alleged environmental violations in Virginia. So I'm not...
Well, there's multiple lawsuits against them, so it might be...
No, I know.
We got to figure it out.
But this is why I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly where it stands right now, but folks should definitely stay up to date by looking at the Appalachians Against Pipelines Facebook page, or on Instagram, or indeed on Twitter, to stay up to date, because... The truth of the matter is, and this is why, like, the Appalachian Against Pipelines, which is the group, what they're called, who are fighting the Valley Pipeline, MVP. This is why they haven't, left their tree sits or anything, or their ground camp, because they know
it's not over.
Well, right. But I think it's important to remind or tell listeners that, because you might see this news and think, oh, fuck yeah, now we can just go home and forget about it. But these legal fights are incredibly janky, and FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, is just a green light entity for these pipelines. And so even when there are...
If you need another metaphor, rubber stamp
Yes.
also works.
Even when there are issues like this that come up in court where, oh, you didn't do this correctly, oh, you need to be fined for polluting, which is also just fucking stupid. Like, nature gives a flying fuck whether you paid anyone.
Well, it's also a parking ticket. It's like how
Right.
UPS knows they're going to get a certain number of parking tickets, and they just fucking eat the cost.
Right. So it's important to note that while this is good news,
The dildo's got to get to the people.
is that related to the pipeline or?
I think that's what they're delivering most of the time. UPS.
Oh.
Yeah. 70% dildos.
I better start ordering some dildos then. While it's important and good to note that sometimes the courts can go in our favor, very often it is just a stay of execution.
Fine. Not
And-
good news.
No, it is.
God damn it.
It is. But again, this is why direct action is what fucking gets the goods.
You are not a positive Polly.
No, I am.
Tell you that much.
But don't call me Polly. I am, but I'm very positive about direct action. Like, I'm positive that is the shit that works. I'm positive that is what we have to engage in, and not just using the courts.
Well, because you took my good news and made it bad news, I am going to take the next bad news and make it sound like good news. DAPL protesters are facing 110 years in prison! Woo-hoo-hoo!
All right. Okay.
Did that help at all?
No, and also I think you just triggered my tinnitus. Okay.
And my night terrors.
Shit. All of it. So, yes, Dakota Access Pipeline activists are facing 110 years in prison. 2 years after they confessed to sabotaging the Dakota Access Pipeline. So basically, they vandalized the DAPL pipeline in an effort to halt construction, and they've been indicted on charges that carry up to 110 years in prison and hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines.
And part of the reason they do this is twofold. One is it's to get them to take a guilty plea that probably will knock that down to who knows what, 5 years or something reasonable, maybe 1 year. Not it's not reasonable. None of it's reasonable, but you know what I mean. Down to like 1 year or something that it sounds doable, survivable. The other reason is to make it so that no one ever threatens the idea of possibly vandalizing or stopping a pipeline in the future. So that's why they throw these insane number of years against them.
Yeah, and this is these bills, these anti-protest bills that are basically known to be, they call it critical infrastructure. So they say that anybody involved in not just trying to halt or impede critical infrastructure, but even if you're just standing close to it, or indeed if you are
flying a drone over it,
if you could be somehow tied to it, like if you retweeted somebody's tweet about wanting to stop the Keystone XL or something, you could also be implicated in these. So they're fucking draconian, they're Orwellian, they're terrifying.
Don't tell them that, though. Keep tweeting, everybody.
Yeah, but also keep acting. But I say that also to say this. It means it's working. Because they wouldn't try to throw this shit at us if our direct action efforts weren't working. So yes, this is awful, and yes, we all need to rally around these two women, Jess and Ruby, who are facing this horrific sentence, and both of them have said that in the past that they stand by their actions. So, I mean, which is incredibly brave and powerful and inspiring. Let this inspire us. Let this inspire others. That these sort of Orwellian laws cannot stand in between us and protecting a livable future, protecting our waterways and our air and our soil. We have to continue to fight. And these fucking laws are just their attempt, because they realize that we are winning, that we have the power to stop them. And this is why they're trying to shut us down with this, but it's not going to work.
And, hopefully maybe there's a possibility that this will help people realize that the criminal justice system has been captured by these massive corporate entities. The fact that this threat even exists shows how much the corporations own our court systems. And, it no longer becomes, once you break your mind of the idea that everything that's ever judged in a courtroom is moral and ethical and that every law is legitimate. Once you start to look beyond that and say which of these laws is not legitimate, then you start to realize that you can end up in a system where things that are quote unquote illegal are actually the right way to behave in certain circumstances. There's people that have been arrested for feeding the homeless. Mm-hmm. And does that mean feeding the homeless is wrong, is immoral, is against the code of the way we should behave? No, it's the opposite. It means that the criminal justice system has been corrupted.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's not going to work, because these women will keep fighting, and the folks that I just spent the weekend with will continue to fight. It's not going to work. And I think that the more that we internalize that message, and the more that we understand that direct action is what works, that this is why Alec and the powers that be who are owned by Alec are doing this. Once we recognize that, we can be at peace and understand the need to continue to fight, and fuck them.
And fuck them. Put it on the poster! Print up those goddamn posters!
My eloquence is somewhere in the woods of Southern Illinois. It's going to take me...
Listen, I think you could win a lot of votes with fuck them on the bottom of a poster. All right, let's get to this next story about the what you Swedes have done.
Well, they've proposed... not me. I had fuck all to do with it. This is the problem with nationalism. It's me. No.
It reminds me of we're quoting a lot of comedians. I hate to quote Bill Maher because he's such a sack of shit. But
wait, no, I thought it was what's his face that had the nationalism shtick.
No, Doug Stanhope has a great nationalism bit. I'm not going to do that right now. But Bill Maher had it. I was saying it reminds me of a joke he had where sports fans, a bunch of little white guys would be like, "We won about an NBA game," and he'll be like, "No, a bunch of 6'7" black dudes who would hate you if they met you won. You did nothing."
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So I like that bit, even though that guy is a true and honorable.
Well,
I
like Doug Stanhope's bit better because it's more political. He talks about like people taking pride in D-Day and shit, and like we stormed the beaches in Normandy, and he's like, I got really fucked up last night, but I don't remember that. I got no texts from the French.
You're making me want to do it because you're missing the lines.
Well, do it then. This is not my thing. You gotta tell him.
Well, no, you should go watch it. People should go type in Doug Stanhope nationalism. Anyway, he's like, when people are like, if it wasn't for us, you'd be speaking German right now. The French would be speaking German. He's like, really? Because of us? Because of you and me, Danny? Yeah, I don't remember that. I remember us getting really fucked up and us ordering those weird chicken fajitas at the drive-thru and then getting to the front of the thing and realizing we didn't have any money, and then we had to ditch out, and we were laughing that the guys behind us probably got our fucking order. I remember that, but I didn't get any texts coming to or going from the French looking for some muscle on a project.
Oh my God, I love that. Yes, so... I fucking love that. Okay. All right. I'm
the point of the bit.
Together.
The point of the bit is the nationalism
is stupid.
It makes people to sum it up better. Yes, stupid. But it makes people take credit for things they never did, right, and feel honor in things that have nothing to do with them.
Yes. Yes, so I did not propose a constitutional amendment. The Swedish government did. Proposed a constitutional amendment that would enshrine the rights of nature. And this is following in the footsteps of indigenous peoples and frontline activists who have pushed, for instance, Lake Erie now has personhood rights. So this is potentially big news, and of course, it's necessary to consider the rights of nature as paramount, because of course we are not above the ecosystem or outside of it. We are a part of the ecosystems. We cannot survive if ecosystems die. So these sort of laws are not.
Well, in a lot of ways, aren't we just little animals crawling around on the top of it? Like, it's more important than us.
On the top of what?
The ecosystem.
No, we're in the ecosystem.
Yeah, but we're like, we're like a bug on your skin, like in terms of the earth.
Well,
like.
yes, but the language, like, on top of.
No, I get it. I get it. Okay, I'm smart. I get it.
All right, you hear that, folks? He's smart. Okay, so. Yes, I think that this is really awesome, and I hope that this moves forward and becomes law, and that that the Swedish government and kind of domino effect, other European countries follow suit. But again, to circle back to what I was just saying, this does not mean that we can sit back, because a law is only as good as its enforcement. So, for instance, technically, it's illegal to kill people for no reason, but look at our cops just fucking shooting people for no fucking reason. According to August numbers, the police have already killed 602 people.
They do regularly over 1,000 a year.
So
in America. Meanwhile, for any of those who haven't seen me mention this on Redacted recently, the number of people killed in Britain in a year, it's like
by the cops.
It's like by the cops. It's like 3. Okay, in Germany, it's somewhere around the same number. We killed more people in a month in America. Our cops did. Than Britain killed in the 1900s. The 1900s, folks.
The
entire century. Now, granted, during most of that, they only had those little sticks, so it would have taken quite an effort. Several people beating the person in teams, in shifts. You might have to go for like an hour or two, but still.
Yes. So yes. So a law is only as good as its enforcement. So hypothetically, if this does become law, that doesn't mean that, again, we can just sit back, just like with MVP, we can't just sit back and be like, oh, they stopped the pipeline construction. Cool. We have to stay vigilant, and we have to ensure that regardless of whether this law is passed or not, that we recognize the importance of the rights of nature and the importance of ecosystems as a whole, so that this doesn't just remain some kind of lip service to the environmental movement and to a livable future, but that we actually stand by this and demand with our actions, not just our words, but our actions, that livable future and the rights of nature and our place in it.
Well said. For someone who claims to be tired, you've given some mighty good speeches.
I have no
tonight.
idea what I just said, by the way.
You're like, were those all words? Was it? Cause it was
what language I
It was
speaking?
a blur to me. No, great points, and yeah, I mean, I love these. I love these laws. I'm always amazed when one of these gets passed anywhere. That to treat a piece of nature as a living entity that has rights is pretty incredible. Although I guess if we passed something that said fucking corporations are human beings, then fucking why can't we?
Absolutely.
if we're already in the mystical world where
right.
Inanimate objects are people.
Even more so because corporations are certainly inanimate, but that fucking frog is sure as shit animated.
Right. Wait, does he get a vote now?
The frog?
In Sweden?
I fucking hope so. I wonder if frogs are conservative. I feel like they would be.
Well, they do look like Mitch McConnell. So
no, he looks like a turtle.
I think he's got a little both in him. He's got the bullfrog gullet thing. Well, that's Pompeo.
What's a turtle?
That's Pompeo.
No, McConnell's got the evil turtle thing.
All right, Pompeo has the bullfrog thing that you inflate. That thing. You know what I'm talking about. All right, I think we ended this on a very important note. I always like to end on something important. There is no extra content this week, but we will serve it up hot and fresh next week. And thank you guys for joining us. I haven't done any of the housekeeping stuff, unfortunately.
Shit.
If you feel like you got anything out of this episode, please go join as a member at patreon.com/Common Censored. You can join for as little as $1 and help keep this show going, because you'll notice there are no ads. This show is not connected to anything else. It's not part of any large, massive entity that rules over us. So please, you guys are the ones that make this happen at patreon.com/Common Censored. You can email us your comments or ideas for topics at
commoncensored@protonmail.com.
You did that so well, it sounded like it was dubbed in later.
It
Common
was.
Censored at protonmail.com. And you can get all of Eleanor's amazing work at artkillingapathy.com. You can hear her on Loud and Clear, which is a radio show, but it's also a podcast, and she was on today's episode, so you can check that out.
True story.
True story. What if you were like totally made up? And I'm at leecamp.com. A lot of good stuff redacted tonight. I've started uploading the pre-game where I do a little stand-up comedy, a keg stand. I talk to the audience about stories that didn't get in the show, and you can watch all of that at youtube.com/Moment of Clarity Show, I believe. Or you can also get it at youtube.com/Redacted Tonight.
And my episode of Act Out comes out tomorrow, Wednesday, October 16th. And this week I'm talking about meat and also interviewing a badass organizer with Fight Toxic Prisons. So be sure to check that out. And until next time, Act Out.
Keep fighting.